in defense of the manosphere, the civilizational bargain. We refuse to discuss. I remember the first time I encountered what would eventually be called manosphere content. It was around 2014. What struck me was not that these men were introducing ideas I had never considered. In many respects, I had already reached similar conclusions independently. I had spent years observing the relationship between men, women, marriage, responsibility, authority, and the institutions that regulate those things. I simply assumed I was one of very few people who saw the pattern. Then I discovered that other men were seeing it too. My first reaction was not excitement. It was fear. That may sound strange, especially because this discussion is being presented as a defense of the manosphere, but I was not afraid because I believed everything these men said was wrong. I was afraid because I understood what could happen if their message spread. I am a systems thinker. I tend to look beyond the immediate statement and ask where an idea leads once enough people begin acting upon it. One frustrated man withdrawing from marriage, family formation, or social responsibility may appear insignificant, but if thousands, or eventually millions, of men reach the same conclusion, then we are no longer discussing individual disappointment. We are discussing a structural problem. When enough men stop believing in the system, stop investing in it, and begin teaching other men not to invest in it, the consequences extend far beyond dating. Eventually, parts of society begin to grind to a halt. That is what concerned me. And that is also why the manosphere deserves to be examined seriously rather than dismissed as nothing more than angry men complaining on the internet. What is the manosphere? The first branch of manosphere content I encountered was MGTOW, men going their own way. I cannot properly call myself MGTOW. I am married, I have 4 children, and I believe deeply in marriage, family, responsibility, and covenant. My household would probably be described by many people as patriarchal. My wife and I have different responsibilities, and I believe that the husband carries final accountability for the direction of the family. That does not mean there is no discussion, no tenderness, no cooperation, or no nuance. Hierarchy does not eliminate nuance. In fact, every functioning hierarchy requires wisdom, restraint, responsibility, and an understanding of individual circumstances. Authority without responsibility becomes tyranny. Responsibility without authority becomes servitude. The existence of nuance does not mean that every distinction disappears. Modern society often resists clear categories. We prefer to treat every question as though it exists on an endless spectrum. But many of the most important decisions in life eventually require us to distinguish between right and wrong, order and disorder, responsibility and irresponsibility, truth and falsehood. The nuance is often found in how a principle is applied. It is not necessarily found in pretending the principle does not exist. That distinction matters when discussing men, women, marriage, and civilization. The manosphere is a broad and disorganized collection of voices. Some of those voices are thoughtful, some are bitter, some are insightful, some are reckless, some are attempting to recover marriage and masculinity. Others appear to have abandoned both. I am not defending every personality, every statement, or every movement operating under the label. I am defending the underlying question. And the question is this: what happens when men conclude that the responsibilities society expects them to carry are no longer connected to authority, honor, belonging, family, or legacy? That is the question beneath most serious manosphere content. The civilizational bargain. Civilization requires men to restrain certain parts of themselves. Historically, men possess the physical capacity to compete, dominate territory, defend resources, and impose their will through strength. Left completely unrestrained, those capacities could produce endless conflict. Civilization therefore offered men a bargain. The bargain was not written on paper. It developed through law, custom, religion, family, property rights, and social expectations. The bargain said, in effect, do not take what belongs to another man merely because you are strong enough to take it. Do not rely upon private violence to protect everything you possess. Submit yourself to law. Direct your strength toward productive labor, protection, construction, service, and defense. Contribute to a social order that protects not only your property, but the property of others. In return, the society will recognize what you build. It will protect your property. It will honor productive and disciplined behavior. It will provide a pathway through which you may establish a household, marry, raise children, transmit your values, and leave something behind when you die. The man would not become the absolute ruler of society, but within his household he would be trusted with meaningful responsibility and corresponding authority. The community would intervene when a man became abusive, criminal, negligent, or destructive, but it would not treat ordinary masculine authority as inherently suspicious. That was the bargain. Restrain your strength, discipline your appetites, work, build, protect, accept responsibility, and in return, you will have a recognized place within the civilization you are helping to sustain. Many men considered that a worthwhile arrangement. They were not merely earning money, they were building a name, a household, and a legacy. When responsibility becomes disconnected from authority, the manosphere's central complaint is that this bargain has been altered. Society continues to expect men to work, protect, provide, sacrifice, remain emotionally controlled, obey the law, and assume responsibility when something goes wrong. But many men believe that the corresponding benefits have become unstable. Marriage no longer appears permanent. Fatherhood does not always guarantee meaningful authority or even continued access to one's children. A man may be held responsible for the welfare of a household while being told that leadership within that household is oppressive. Traditional masculine expectations are invoked whenever society needs labor, protection, discipline, sacrifice, or courage. But those same expectations are frequently condemned when a man asks what authority, honor, loyalty, or security accompanies his obligations. The message can begin to sound like this. Be traditional when we need something from you. Be modern when you ask what you receive in return. Carry responsibility, but do not expect authority. Provide stability, but do not expect permanence. Sacrifice for the institution, but do not assume the institution will protect your place within it. Whether one agrees with that interpretation or not, it is not difficult to understand why some men believe the original bargain has been broken. The manosphere is, at its foundation, a response to that perceived breach. It is men saying, "You changed the terms after we agreed to participate." And when people believe the terms of an agreement have been changed without their consent, they begin to reconsider their participation. Withdrawal is a choice, but it has consequences. A man may decide that marriage is no longer worth the risk. He may decide not to have children. He may limit his ambition to the amount of work necessary to support himself. He may refuse leadership because leadership brings liability without authority. He may retreat into entertainment, private interests, casual relationships, or isolation. Morally, each individual decision must still be evaluated on its own. A husband cannot use cultural dysfunction as an excuse to abandon the wife and children to whom he has already made commitments. A father cannot invoke social criticism to escape his responsibilities. Covenants already made must be honored. But an unmarried man is not biblically required to marry. A man cannot be forced to establish a household. He cannot be compelled to pursue a social arrangement that he believes will expose him to serious obligations without corresponding stability. Participation requires consent. This is the part of the discussion society often tries to avoid. Instead of asking why men are withdrawing, we shame them for withdrawing. We call them weak, immature, insecure, misogynistic, intimidated, undesirable, or incapable of relating to women. Sometimes one or more of those descriptions may apply to a particular man. But name-calling is not analysis. If a measurable number of men are reaching similar conclusions, the intellectually responsible response is to investigate the incentive structure. What do these men believe they are being asked to do? What do they believe they will receive in return? Why do they no longer trust the institutions involved? Are all their conclusions correct? Probably not. But dismissing the question does not make the condition disappear. The biblical question. As a Christian, I cannot approach this issue as though individual preference is the highest authority. Men are not permitted to use masculinity as an excuse for lust, cruelty, irresponsibility, pride, exploitation, or hatred. Biblical masculinity is not the unrestricted pursuit of male desire. A Christian man is called to discipline himself, serve others, protect the vulnerable, keep his word, work faithfully, exercise authority justly, and sacrifice for those entrusted to his care. A husband is not merely given authority, he is commanded to love sacrificially. That is a tremendous burden. But Scripture also does not pretend that men and women are interchangeable or that family order is oppressive by definition. The biblical household contains structure, obligation, authority, submission, protection, provision, love, and accountability. These ideas have often been abused. Their abuse does not make their proper use illegitimate. Scripture also recognizes that not every man will marry. Marriage is honorable, but it is not compulsory. A man may remain unmarried without being morally defective. Therefore, when an unmarried man looks at the present institution of marriage and decides not to enter it, society may disagree with his analysis, but it cannot honestly claim that he has violated a universal command simply by remaining single. The more serious question is what happens when a culture makes marriage appear so unstable, adversarial, or dangerous that large numbers of men no longer desire it. That should concern anyone who values family formation. The warning within the manosphere. I am not suggesting that the manosphere has all the answers. It does not. Some of its voices confuse female nature with female wickedness. Some encourage promiscuity while criticizing women for the same behavior. Some replace responsibility with resentment. Some have built businesses around keeping men permanently angry because angry men continue watching. Some men enter these spaces looking for understanding and leave with a new collection of excuses. That must be acknowledged. But the corruption of a movement does not automatically invalidate the grievance that created it. Andrew Tate is not the manosphere. No single influencer is the manosphere. The manosphere existed before its most famous personalities, and it will continue after they disappear. At its deepest level, it is not a celebrity, an organization, or even a unified ideology. It is a conversation among men about whether the social order still deserves their trust. The danger is not merely that some men say offensive things online. The greater danger is that society becomes so focused on condemning their language that it refuses to consider why the message resonates. When men withdraw, everyone eventually feels the consequences. Families feel it. Children feel it. Communities feel it. Institutions feel it. Women feel it. The economy feels it. Civilization depends upon men who believe building, protecting, sacrificing, and committing are worthwhile. A society cannot endlessly ridicule masculine responsibility while continuing to depend upon its products. Renegotiation or collapse. This brings us to the uncomfortable conclusion. If the civilizational bargain has changed, then the bargain must be discussed again. That does not mean stripping women of basic rights. It does not mean justifying abuse. It does not mean forcing women into marriages or forcing men to lead households they are incapable of leading. It means having an honest discussion about responsibility, authority, marriage, divorce, fatherhood, property, sexual ethics, family law, and the different expectations placed upon men and women. Renegotiation will be painful because restoring balance requires some desires to be restrained. But civilization itself is built upon restrained desire. Men restrain desire. Women restrain desire. Parents restrain desire. Children are taught to restrain desire. Freedom cannot mean that every individual receives everything he or she wants without consequences. If we refuse to discuss the terms under which men will willingly commit themselves to marriage, fatherhood, work, protection, and leadership, men will continue renegotiating privately. They will simply withdraw, and society can shame them, insult them, diagnose them, or blame an internet personality for influencing them. But shame cannot replace incentive. Insults cannot restore trust, and propaganda cannot repair a broken institution. Either we seriously examine the reasons men are withdrawing, or we experience the consequences of that withdrawal. Those are the available choices. Conclusion. My defense of the manosphere is not a defense of anger. It is not a defense of hatred toward women. It is not a defense of irresponsibility, promiscuity, arrogance, or abandonment. It is a defense of the question the manosphere is forcing society to confront. Why should men continue accepting traditional responsibilities inside institutions that no longer recognize traditional obligations toward them? Perhaps some manosphere conclusions are wrong. Perhaps some are exaggerated. Perhaps some men have misunderstood the nature of sacrifice and believe that every obligation must provide an immediate personal reward. Those possibilities should be examined, but the question itself is legitimate. And until society is willing to answer it honestly, the manosphere will continue to grow. Not because every man within it hates women, not because every man within it is angry, but because a growing number of men believe the social contract has been broken, and no one in authority is willing to admit that the terms have changed. Here on Andre Washington, my objective is not to tell you what you must think. My objective is to place the question in front of you clearly enough that you cannot avoid thinking about it. Because before we can repair our institutions, we must understand the assumptions beneath them. And before we can understand those assumptions, we must learn how to think about thinking.